Should you buy NIO stock or Lucid stock? Well, assuming you're going to buy today and hold until 2030, both NIO and Lucid stock have not been doing very well recently. I mean, NIO's down over 50% this past year, while Lucid's been down 66% in that time. For NIO's potential upside, we're going to assume the share price rises alongside their revenue, with their current growth of 15.9% per year, which would mean a share price of 12.5 at their current valuation in 2030. Analysts are actually projecting a growth rate of 19.7% though, which is more than the 15.9, and that would mean a share price of $15.63 at their current valuation. But one thing to note is their price to sales ratio is 1.18, and that's less than the auto industry's, like the industry median at 1.24. And so I think their valuation is actually going to increase as time goes on to, rest around the industry average. So if we use that 1.24 ratio along with their projected revenue growth according to analysts, again, that 19.7 per annum number, then we would see a share price of around $16.43 by 2030, which is a 270% upside. Compared to Lucid's potential, again, assuming their share price is going to follow the revenue growth, and their TTM is actually lower than previous, which is interesting because analysts are projecting like a 39% annual growth rate from now until 2025. So using this growth rate and just extrapolating that and assuming that's going to continue on to 2030, Lucid can expect to see a share price of $26.67. And the price to sales ratio is really high though at 10.2. So, if you compare that again to the industry average of 1.24, I think that ratio is going to come down a bit, probably half to around 5 in 2030. I think that's a fair estimate. And personally, I think the growth rate, or the projected growth rate anyways, of 39% is really, really high. So I'm going to apply a 28% annual growth rate, which is still high, but it's, quite a bit lower than the analysts are predicting, and I think is a little more realistic. And using these metrics, the price to sales ratio of 5, a 28% annual growth rate for Lucid, using these metrics, I think we can expect to see a stock price of $7.34 by 2030, which is a 176% upside. So if you compare that to NIO's potential upside, I just calculated of 270, I think that NIO is the better choice from solely a price to sales multiple perspective when each company is given some realistic growth rates and valuation ratios. And I think, NIO appears better just mainly due to Lucid's valuation being so high right now at 10.2 compared to the industry average again at 1.24. And if you take Lucid's current valuation of 10.2 at a 28% growth rate, the price would be $14.97 by 2030, which is a 463% upside. So if you think that's going to happen, if you think they're going to keep their valuation high, then in that case, Lucid would definitely be the better choice for you if you thought they were going to have a higher valuation by 2030. Some more info is NIO's debt to equity is 0.89. Lucid's is about half that at 0.43. So Lucid's is definitely looking better. NIO is also getting ready to launch its Firefly and Envo sub-brands, and Lucid is gearing up to launch its Gravity SUV. So both companies have some promising growth opportunities there, hence their pretty high growth rates. NIO also beat 2 of its last 4 earnings reports, usually missing or beating the estimates by around 10%. And then Lucid beat 3 of their 4 last reports, and it's kind of all over the board in terms of just how far off the estimates were. Both NIO and Lucid's short-term estimates have recently been downgraded by analysts because they're expecting a huge global EV slowdown, and I suspect it's because of Tesla's recent delivery numbers. So really, both are going to be volatile, at least in the short term, probably going into medium and long term as well. And certainly right now, they're both very high risk, high reward plays. But if I had to pick one, I would say that NIO just overall shows more promise of growth because not only do they have more models currently than Lucid, but they will also be expanding that with 2 new sub-brands. And they just have more variety for consumers to choose from. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you next video.